Hey book besties, welcome to my August reading wrap up. I feel like I say this in every single wrap up video, but I truly had the best reading month this month and I pretty much loved almost every single one. So I'm super excited to be showing you guys the books and talk you through my thought process and my rating. If you want to see what books I'm hoping to read in September, I uploaded my September TBR. That was actually my last video, so go check that out if you want to see what books are on my radar for next month. Here is the stack of books that I read this month. I read 11 physical books and I listened to 1 audiobook this month. Let's talk about the series that I finished this month though, because this basically took up half of August. Well, actually it technically took up my first week of August because I flew through the series, and that was the Selection series. I read the first book, The Selection, last month and I really enjoyed it. It was a 5 out of 5 star read for me, so I knew I wanted to continue the series in August. So I read every single book, including the novellas and the sequels this month. But if you don't know what the Selection series is, it's basically like Hunger Games meets The Bachelor in a dystopian world. So in this dystopian world, there is this competition called the Selection, which is for the prince to basically pick his wife, who will also end up being the princess of their country. And 35 girls get selected to compete in the Selection. And we follow our main character, America, who is one of the girls competing for the prince's heart, but she actually never wanted to be a part of the Selection in the first place because she is in love with her first love back home. So there's a little bit of a love triangle situation going on, and normally I'm not into love triangles in books, but this series is definitely an exception to that. So The Selection is the first book, and there are 2 books that continue on from the first book, which are The Elite and The One. The Elite is narrowed down to 6 girls, but America is still very indecisive on who she wants to be with, either her first love Aspen or the prince Maxon. So it was a little bit annoying because she was so indecisive and she was going back and forth between the 2. Like, we knew what was going to happen and who she was going to pick, but the whole book was basically like her indecisiveness. But I still really enjoyed it. Definitely not as good as the first book though, and I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. Then we've got The One. I loved this book. This book was so good, but the only thing that I didn't like about this book is that there were so many side characters that died, and literally all of them except for one I really loved. So it was such an emotional read. I gave this one 4.5 stars though. It would have been 5 stars if they didn't kill off half of my favorite side characters. Then I read Happily Ever After, which is a selection of novellas. I listened to this as an audiobook, so I don't have a physical copy with me. This has novellas from a few different side characters, which was really fun to read their perspectives and their story. I rated the whole book with all the novellas 4 out of 5 stars, but my favorite novellas were definitely Prince Maxon's perspective because he was so funny. Like, I wish we got to see more of his funny side in the first 3 books. And I also really loved Marley, who was America's best friend. She had her own little novella as well, and was her and her love story, and I absolutely loved that. And because I absolutely love the Selection universe, I wanted to read the spin-off series as well, but I'm just gonna say the sequels are definitely not as good. But I read The Heir and The Crown. This follows Maxon and America's daughter, Princess Adeline, and this is now The Bachelorette meets The Hunger Games, because the Selection is happening for Princess Adeline, and there are 35 boys that are competing for Adeline's heart. The Heir I rated 3 out of 5 stars. I personally didn't really enjoy Adeline's character. She was just self-absorbed and entitled, which I feel like didn't really match up with Maxon and America's traits, because they were definitely not like that. There was a little bit of character development, but yeah, it was just an okay book. I mainly like these books because you got to see the OG characters back again, but like as adults, and see where they are now, so that was fun. The Crown, however, I did not like this book. First of all, it was pretty short, so I feel like this book was really rushed. I also really didn't like who Adeline ended up choosing. I just didn't see the chemistry between the 2 of them, and I don't know, their relationship was very rushed, so I didn't ship it. Wasn't a fan of that, so I rated this one 2 out of 5 stars. If you're looking at starting the series, I definitely would probably recommend reading the first 3 books and maybe picking up the novella, because I personally thought that the 2 spin-off books weren't really really that great, and I definitely could have not read them. Like, I don't regret reading them, but I definitely could have gone without reading them. And then I've got a couple of Colleen Hoover books here because I ended up filming a I read Colleen Hoover books for a week video. I haven't actually posted that one yet, but it should hopefully be up within the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out on my channel if you want to see a whole coho dedicated reading vlog, because I ended up finishing 4 books, I guess 3.5 books because one of them is a novella. So I'm going to briefly go through my ratings and reviews since I'll be having a whole dedicated video for these 4 books. So I read Confess. This one was such a cool book because we have our main character Owen. Owen is an artist and he takes anonymous confessions and turns them into pieces of art. And what's really cool about this book is that all of the confessions are actually real life confessions that were sent in to Colleen Hoover by fans, which was so interesting to read. And then we have our other main character, Auburn. This is in dual POV, by the way. Auburn is looking for a second job because she's really needing the money. So she sees a help wanted sign for Owen's art gallery and she ends up working for him for like 2 hours and they fall in love. It is insta-lovey, keep that in mind, but it is like a very full circle moment. I can't really elaborate on it more than that without spoiling the book, but I just found this book so interesting. It was so cool. Like, the confessions aspect of it was definitely my favorite part of the book. I rated this one 4.5 stars. Then I decided to read the Maybe Someday series because I feel like I don't really hear that many people talking about this series. So I read Maybe Someday and then the novella Maybe Not. Maybe Someday follows Sydney and Ridge. Sydney finds out that her boyfriend cheats on her with her roommate, so she ends up actually moving into Ridge's apartment. They're both really into music and Ridge is actually part of a band and he is in a state of writer's block. Sydney basically helps him with writing lyrics. This book was cool because there's an actual original soundtrack that you can listen to that features the songs that they write in this book. So I was listening to that soundtrack while reading this book, which kind of enhanced the experience. But this book had a trope in it that I absolutely do not like, and that really just made me not enjoy the book. Plus, I didn't really see the chemistry between Sydney and Ridge, and I also just didn't really like them as characters, especially Sydney. Like, I found her very hypocritical. So I rated this one 2.5 stars. My first coho book that I just didn't enjoy. But that's okay because you're not gonna like every single book that you read. But I did decide to read Maybe Not because it actually follows 2 side characters from the first book, which are Warren and Bridget, and they start off as roommates with benefits. I really loved Warren in the first book, so I was excited to read his story, and it's actually in his perspective only. And Bridget's character was also really interesting because you couldn't really get to see much in Maybe Someday, but her story was actually really interesting and I loved Warren and Bridget together. I do wish though, like, as much as I love like my spicy books, I feel like because it's 120 pages, there was too much spice and not enough plot because it is a novella. But I did rate this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Definitely better than Maybe Someday. Then I read my favorite Colleen Hoover book and my favorite book that I read in August, and that was Reminders of Him. Oh my god, guys, this book is so freaking good. I'm pretty sure in my reading vlog I was like raving about this book, and I even tabbed it. It is amazing. This book follows Kenna Rowan. She has just served 5 years in prison for a very tragic mistake, and she comes back and she is wanting to get reunited with her 4-year-old daughter, but everyone in her 4-year-old daughter's life is preventing that from happening, and the only person that is connected to her daughter is Ledger, and he is the only one that hasn't fully shut his door on her. And oh my goodness, their relationship was everything. But not only that, my heart was warming up when I was reading about Ledger and how sweet his relationship with Kenna's daughter was. Like, he was the perfect father figure in her life, and this book's ending was just so sweet, and I just absolutely love this book with my whole entire heart. Best coho book I have read to date. So good, 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Tools of Engagement by Tessa Bailey. This is the last book in the Hot and Hammered series, and it is Bethany and Wes's story. It is also enemies to lovers, and I guess workplace romance because Wes ends up helping out or like working for Bethany because Bethany starts her own fixer-upper business against her brother and dad, so there's some family rivalry going on. And and the banter in this book between Bethany and Wes is elite. I live for good banter in books, and this one definitely did a really good job with that. And also on top of that, my favorite thing about this book was definitely the anxiety rep. I feel like the anxiety rep was done in a very realistic way. Bethany is such an overthinker and does struggle with anxiety, and I could totally relate to her in that sense. Like, she was such a relatable character that ended up making this book my favorite book out of the whole series. Like, this was just so good. I love how Wes was so supportive of Bethany and like never gave up on her, and I feel like they just balanced each other out so well. We also got a good backstory of Wes as well. Like, you could really connect to both characters, and I just really love that. And the spice, you already know Tessa Bailey writes some amazing spice, and this one was just so good. I rated this one 4.25 out of 5 stars. Then I read Sadie on a Plate by Amanda Elliott. This book is so perfect if you are a foodie, if you love cooking competitions like a MasterChef. This book basically gives off that MasterChef cooking competition vibe. So we follow Sadie, who is an aspiring chef, and she actually gets picked to compete in this cooking competition called Chef Supreme. So she has to travel to New York to compete, and on her flight she meets Luke, who's also a chef, and they literally fall in love in a day. So it is very insta-lovey. But then Sadie finds out that Luke is actually going to be a judge on the competition that she's in, so it's kind of like forbidden romance because they should not be together at all. There's definitely not much romance in this book. It's definitely more focused on the cooking competition, so definitely keep that in mind if you are going into this book, mainly for the romance, because there's not a lot of romance in there till like the end of the book, and I didn't really care too much about the romance. I was literally there for all the food content because I'm such a foodie. I ended up rating this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Definitely recommend if you are looking for a book with a cooking competition in it and a little bit of romance, like the tiniest bit of romance. The last book I read in August, I really wanted to read because it was my birthday month this month, and that was Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. This is the first book that I've read from this author, and I was really nervous going into it because I didn't really know what to expect, and I just heard so many mixed reviews, and I didn't really know if I was gonna love her books, but I'm glad that I gave it a shot. So this follows Jordan and Pike. Jordan has just turned 19, and she spends her birthday at the movie theaters where she meets Pike. They start talking, they get along, you know, Pike is like this really hot older guy, and then later that night she finds out that Pike is actually her boyfriend's father, and her and her boyfriend have to move in with Pike because they get kicked out of their apartment. And as the story progresses, Pike and Jordan gain an attraction to each other, and you know where the story goes from there. I still don't know what I want to rate this book because I feel like I liked it, but it also took me like 2 weeks to finish reading this book because I was struggling to pick it up. But when I did pick it up, I was enjoying it, but also at the same time there were things in this book that I was really like not feeling. But I did enjoy the writing in this book, and I did like Jordan's character, but I also feel like their relationship was also quite toxic at times. Obviously, it was a little bit weird to read about, just mainly because she's just turned 19 years old and Pike is like 38. An age gap doesn't really bug me if like Jordan was like in her mid-20s or something, but because she was only 19, but it is fictional obviously. I think like overall I'm probably gonna rate this one a 3.5 stars at the moment. Yeah, it's definitely not lower than 3 stars, but it's also not in that okay range where I want to rate it 3 stars only, but it's definitely not a 4 or 5 star read for me, so 3.5 sounds like that's a good option. So that is it for my August reading wrap up. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned because I would love to know your thoughts on them. And definitely check out my September TBR if you guys want to see what I want to read in September. And give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel down below so you don't miss out on any future videos. And go ahead and follow me on all my socials. I'll also leave my Goodreads and my Amazon wishlist link down below as well. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye!